A number of different studies have looked at what happens after clinicians look up information in UpToDate. And as it turns out, they found consistently that many times clinicians will change what they were originally going to do. The range has been from 18% on the low side to as high as 37%, which I've shown here. The average is probably around 30%. But what that means is that a clinician looking up information in UpToDate, about 30% of the time will change what they originally had considered to do. And when we've examined those changes in more detail, they are substantial. They're not trivial or nice to have changes. They actually change the experience and the choices for the patient. And all of those changes turn out to have an important and measurable impact on care when looked at a population level. At least 2 studies have looked at the impact of UpToDate in U.S. hospitals in aggregate. I'm showing you here only the most recent, which was conducted by researchers at the Harvard School of Public Health. They examined a large group of UpToDate hospitals as they adopted it during a 3-year observation period and adjusted for multiple different factors that were involved in hospital performance. What they found was that UpToDate was an independent predictor of a number of favorable outcomes, including improved quality and quality scores on the Health Quality Alliance measures, all of them. Shorter hospital length of stay, 372,000 days estimated during a 3-year observation period, and lower mortality rates with an estimate of 11,500 lives saved during that period. Again, this study was a study of association, so causality cannot be proven, but in aggregate with the changed decision-making, it suggests that UpToDate may indeed have an important effect on healthcare outcomes, which are measurable at a population level. Another study was conducted by investigators at the University of Tokyo that examined the impact of having access to UpToDate on diagnostic errors. They examined a group of clinicians that served as a control that did not have access to UpToDate, compared to a group of clinicians that were assigned access to UpToDate, and then chart abstractors reviewed the records of patients in both cohorts to determine whether or not a diagnostic error was present. The rate of diagnostic errors in the control group without access to UpToDate was 24%. By comparison, the rate of diagnostic errors in the group assigned to UpToDate was only 2%, suggesting that access to UpToDate may have a substantial benefit on the reduction of diagnostic errors. COVID-19 provided an example where the global need for reliable information has been expanded and the timelines for creating such content has been compressed to have unparalleled urgency. I was at a TEDMed meeting in Boston early March this year. I didn't know that the Biogen conference, which turned out to be a COVID-19 super spreader event, had taken place the week before in a hotel 5 minutes away. I was a little nervous sitting amid 700 people, but I took comfort that one of the speakers was Dr. Peter Piot, shown here. Dr. Piot is head of the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine and was one of the discoverers of Ebola and helped to track and contain outbreaks. He knew the dangers of pandemic viruses. Dr. Heidi Larson, also shown, who happens to be married to Dr. Piot, also gave a fascinating talk about the reasons that some people avoid vaccination, a topic that may become increasingly relevant in coming months. If the two of them were there, I thought, we were likely to be quite safe. One thing that I did not take comfort in, though, was Dr. Piot's answer when he answered where to get state-of-the-art clinical information about COVID-19. He suggested that the CDC and the WHO, both organizations, clearly have the needed expertise, but the scale and the pace of the information needs, I feared, could overwhelm their ability to produce and maintain a robust knowledge resource. As it turns out, Dr. Piot acquired COVID-19 later in March, but thankfully he recovered. He's unsure where he contracted it, although likely not at the TEDMed conference that I'd attended, but it just serves to show the point that the pandemic has surprises even for the most informed. So creating content to meet the needs for a pandemic such as COVID-19 involves many different capabilities. Number one, you have to have a team with the expertise in the clinical domain who are trained in evidence-based medicine and in technical writing. Number two, you have to have the ability to identify the right questions and keep up with them as they evolve. Number three, you have to make the process transparent to users. Show where the information came from, show different sources of information, show how the information was analyzed, and make the recommendations as clear as they possibly can be and linked to the available information and evidence. Number four, you need to have effective ways to share what is known and the uncertainty around it. Number five, you need to have thoughtful frontline experts say what they do. The importance of this cannot be understated or overstated. I'll get back to that with a slide in just a moment. And then you need to have to maintain all of the above as new information evolves. What I'm showing you here is a graphic of the grades which are used in UpToDate to grade the strength of the evidence. Evidence isn't always clear. In fact, most of the time, it's far less certain, making it imperative that the evidence is presented clearly and supplemented with interpretation and experience from frontline clinicians who are deeply entrenched in the area. As I mentioned earlier, UpToDate has more than 7,000 worldwide contributors who are selected for their deep clinical expertise. They work collaboratively with more than 50 deputy editor physicians, also specialists, external peer reviewers, and finally you, as an UpToDate user, when you graciously offer us your feedback as a final step in peer review. All of your feedback, by the way, is cataloged and reviewed by one of our deputy editors, and changes to the content, when needed, are made. UpToDate scores recommendations using the GRADE, G-R-A-D-E. It's an acronym standing for Grading of Recommendation, Assessment, Development, and Evaluation. That's an international standard. The system ranks the strength of a recommendation and the strength of evidence on an ordinal scale. So a grade 1A recommendation is a strong recommendation based on strong evidence, while a grade 2C is a weaker recommendation based on weaker evidence. Only 6% of recommendations overall in UpToDate are a 1A. That means that there is less than strong evidence. When there's less than strong evidence, as is the case very often, it's very important to make the evidence clear and then supplement it with guidance for the most experienced clinicians in the world. You can't leave someone at the front line with the statement that there's insufficient evidence, so we can't tell you what to do. It's also equally important to understand and cover the questions that arise. COVID-19 has turned out to be a complex multi-organ disease with many clinical considerations in a variety of populations, all of which need reliable information. The editorial staff has added more than 36 topic reviews covering the spectrum of clinical manifestations and care in adults and children. I'm showing you here some of the titles. They are incredibly detailed. They describe how to use anesthesia machines when ventilators aren't available, issues related to gastrointestinal manifestations, neurologic manifestations, cardiac manifestations, manifestations and treatment during pregnancy, and a variety of other circumstances that are relevant at the bedside. All of these have to be discovered, covered, maintained with transparency, with an evidentiary basis, and then colored with recommendations from the best people in the world who are caring for these patients. These topic reviews, these 36, were added with focus and timeliness and with uncompromising rigor. I'm showing you that here in this cartoon. The first COVID-19 topic was added back in January, so very soon after the epidemic was first apparent to the world, and many more topics continue to be added subsequently. These topics, along with the relevant drug content from LexiComp and patient content from EMI, were all made free to the world, and they've been viewed more than 10 million times, and they've been updated hundreds of times. And there's an added benefit from all of this searching that's taken place. I'm showing you here a screenshot from a website that's available free to the public that looks at searches in UpToDate related to COVID-19. These were aggregated together in something called a normalized search intensity index. And the graphic on the left shows you a bubble chart of search intensity by regions, in the United States by states, and in the rest of the world by country, whereas the size of the bubble corresponds to the intensity of the searching. As it turns out, the intensity of searching in UpToDate correlates with the actual documented cases. I'm showing you a expanded view of Florida as an example. The red line shows you the actual number of cases that were recorded as reported by Johns Hopkins University. And the orange line above it shows you the searches within UpToDate. The salient point here is that a spike in UpToDate searching related to COVID-19 occurred weeks before the documented uptick in the cases that were there, potentially providing a window for early tracking of flares in the pandemic. So these data are going to be used by epidemiologists to help to track the pandemic in a collaboration now with Boston Children's Hospital that's incorporating this into broader models for disease tracking.